Hi, Claire. Welcome to Awaken and Align. So nice to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
I want to hear about your origin story, and that's where we usually begin. And you can take that as far back as you feel called to, like where you were born, did you go to college, what did you study, to as
Mhm.
recently as your book.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I actually grew up all over the world. My dad was in the military. And so my growing up story is very bouncing around. I never really had a sense of home and or a sense of belonging. I always felt kind of like the new kid all the time, always new in school, always in a different place. And so that was a really big part of my of what shaped my mind and how I think, and also my sensitivity emotionally, etc. But as far as more recently, my story is really um, the foundation of it is really illness based. So I became very sick when I was about 19 or 20, and that illness stayed with me for a really long time. And that led me on this path of first trying to figure out what made me feel better. And then, as Virgos tend to do, turned that into some type of career path. So I eventually made my way to school to study acupuncture and then to study nutrition alongside. And so while I was there, I just saw a flyer in the bathroom for a medical astrology conference. And it was one of those moments where I was like, I've never had an interest in this. In fact, I've been scared of astrology my whole life because I grew up in a religious household and was told it was bad.
Mhm.
But I was like, you know what? I really want to go to this. And I went, and it's kind of like the rest is history. It just eclipsed, pardon my astrology pun, but eclipsed any other interest I had. Like all of my studies suddenly took a backseat to learning as much about astrology as I could.
Mhm.
And because of where I was just studying Chinese medicine and studying nutrition, I was just naturally drawn initially to the medical astrology realm, and that's what I ran with and started practicing.
Hmm. And what was it about Chinese medicine and astrology that was able to not heal you, but remedy a lot of your illnesses versus Western medicine?
What I really value, and I don't practice acupuncture anymore, and I'm not in that realm of medicine anymore. However, what I really value and respect about um, that world of medicine is the elemental viewpoint, and um, that shared vocabulary is in Western medical astrology, although the elemental systems are different. And I feel like we should keep them very separate and honor their integrity and where they came from. Um, I felt that Chinese medicine and the elemental language of medical astrology gave me a voice that I couldn't really find in conventional medicine. So we're told we need diagnoses or we fit into certain boxes. And that wasn't the case for my physical experience. No one was able to catch the actual infection or the tick bite or the whatever it was. It didn't fit into a box. So that's what I really love about this elemental signature, is that it allows everyone to identify with something. No one really falls through the cracks, if you will.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And just for my own curiosity, what form of or what lineage of astrology does medical astrology fall under?
Yeah, it's very, very complex. There's a very lengthy history of medical astrology. And just for anyone listening, I think Traditional Medical Astrology by Dr. J. Lee Lehman is a really good book to pick up, because they are really good at pinpointing the history, and I am not. But um, there is medical astrology within Chinese astrology. There's medical astrology within Vedic astrology, but the kind that I practice is traditional Western astrology, which we also know as not Western. There's a lot of roots in the Middle East, in Africa. It eventually made its way to England, and there's a lot of old books where physicians were practicing this, and that's why there's such a tradition there. But yeah, it's traditional Western medical astrology, the short answer to your question.
And and I know I asked you this in one of my questions in my emails, is it comparable to like the doshas in Ayurveda?
My opinion is no. And that's because I like to respect different medical traditions and the cultures that they came from. And I find that when we combine them, there's the danger of misplacing the meaning, or maybe not understanding what that culture actually relates to air in a different way than maybe my culture would relate to air. And so I am going to say that I don't practice in a way where I see that it's a one-to-one correlation. I know there are astrologers who have a different opinion than I do, but no, the clearest and cleanest answer is it's a different system and a different way of looking at the elements, and a different zodiac too. So it's really something you got to be careful mixing and merging together.
Great. So you can look at someone's natal chart and
Mhm.
it will reveal secrets about this person's energy and their body and their health. Question
Yeah.
mark?
Question mark. Yeah, what I love about medical astrology is that I kind of view it as just an anatomical map of how your body naturally functions. And you were born this way. It's not, something that changes over time, but trauma can cloud over our natal chart. Society can tell us we should be or do or look, or that health is a certain thing. And so what I love about astrology is that we all have a unique expression of what health actually is. And it doesn't have to look like anyone else's. And so when I read a chart, it's more like getting people back in touch with their authentic expression of health and how their body feels most comfortable, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I
Mm-hmm.
think I think the first thing that we need to do is define health, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least for me, because I find oftentimes, and I was born and raised in America, so I can only speak from that point of view. Health is seen as just our bodies, and
Mm-hmm.
also from a disease curation point of view, not a preventative system. And so, for me, health embodies a lot more than just the body. It embodies like our mental health, our energy, our spirituality, and our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also the systems in place that foster that or not. So, in your studies, what does health actually mean?
Mm-hmm. You and I are on the same page when it comes to what health means. We are very much more than a body, absolutely. And I also think that our culture and society makes health an achievement, or something that has some type of moral attachment, which can be really icky and very difficult and oppressive. So in my system, the way I view health is really creating tenderness and compassion for what's arising in the body, mental state, and emotional state in present time. For me, I'm all about I'm all about creating compassion for how the body is now, the present day body, instead of treating a future body or an imaginary body, or et cetera, et cetera. So I call the book Body Astrology, but really I'm also talking about, most of the time, the emotional approach we have to our bodies, the energetic approach we take to health behaviors, which, by the way, health is much more than behaviors. Health isn't a behavior. That's really important to say as well. But yeah, you and I are on the same page. I may use the body as an entry point,
Mhm.
But most of the time, what I really want to talk to people about in consultation is their emotional relationship with their body and developing compassion and tenderness for their present day body.
Yeah, because I imagine there's a lot of unlearning that needs to be done, right? Because just growing up in the 90s and the 2000s, it was a lot about low fat and low
Mhm,
calorie and like exercising until you pass
mhm.
away. And I can imagine there's a lot of deprogramming of like what health means to us personally.
Yeah. Oh, all the time. And I think it's really important for each of us to sit with what does it mean to me and to you, because it's not going to be the same. And to standardize that definition, I think is really unhelpful. um, yeah. So a lot of my time as an astrologer, and I'm also an anti-diet nutritionist, and I do intuitive eating counseling. And most of my time is actually spent educating people on how diet culture in our society has caused harm and separating. People blame themselves for that when we've grown up in a society that is really messed up and skewed. And so I do a lot of like picking apart that that's not their fault and reacquainting them with trust in their own voice because we're taught to suppress it.
Yeah. It
Mhm.
must be so validating to read someone's natal chart and say, like, this is actually not how you're supposed to treat your body. And so, I know this is like a huge question, but
That's
what
okay.
are some, um, like things that you look at in the chart? I'm assuming the first house, right? And like your
Oh,
sun,
yeah.
moon, and your rising are important.
Yeah, so I can give you like bullet points and then you can choose where you want to go
Okay.
because there's lots of doorways into this. So the way I organized the book with body astrology was really bite-sized because this book was supposed to be for anyone who wanted to pick it up, whether they're a first-time astrology reader or not. And so one of the entryways I used in the book was what I called the body astrology triad, which astrologers we all know as your big three. So your sun, moon, and rising. So that's one entry point, each of those. But then there's also the houses of health, which are 1, 6, 8, and 12. And so you can also take that as an entry point. So I don't know if anything's speaking to you specifically.
Oh, all of them. I guess what I've learned as well is like your rising sign is yourself and your body, and then your moon is
Mm,
also your body, and then the sixth house is health. So that's kind of like how I know about body astrology and health. So if you want to take any of those,
yeah, I could just break them all down pretty
yes.
briefly. Yeah, yeah, okay. Okay. So the sun, it's not very physical, as you know. It's this big orb we see in the sky, and it has these relationships more so with God, if you will, and out there. So it's more in line with maybe how we think about our bodies, our identity as it relates to our body, but it's not necessarily how our physical animal body works. However, one caveat to that is in medical astrology, the sun is the generator, it is the vital force. And
Mhm.
so, of course, we want to make sure our sun is respected and honored and that we care for our sun and make sure we stay connected to our authentic sense of self, because otherwise the sun will fall ill, right? So it's important. But to me, the moon is the most important. And that's for many, many reasons. But in medical astrology, it represents how the body is nourished. So, food, sleep, shelter, love, and care, all of those things are the realm of the moon. And so, knowing your moon sign is very important in astrological self care 101. The moon also speaks to, and this might be interesting to you, is like energetic flow. And we could speak to like subtle energetic bodies, but also how your energy flows throughout the day, throughout the hours. What is natural for you? So, not all of us are supposed to have a 9 to 5 cubicle job, right? Our natal moon speaks to how our energy ebbs and flows throughout the day. And then the rising sign, which corresponds with the first house, yes, it's the body for sure, but it's really structural. Like, this is my skin, these are my bones, blah, blah, blah. Whereas the moon is structural, but it's more like internal dynamics. Whereas the rising sign is kind of external, what you see, how the body carries you through the world, etc. Does that make sense, the distinction between those two? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. When I listened to you on a different podcast and you went through each of the moon signs by element and how we actually like to exercise, it was like, what? I never made that, like, it just didn't hit me until you said it. And so my moon is in Aquarius in the third
Me
house.
too. Oh, high five.
Yay!
Yeah, in the third house. So you're Sag rising as well?
Yes. Yes, I'm a Sag rising. Yay! This is so magical. But my favorite exercise when I lived in Manhattan was Soul Cycle, and it was an indoor cycling class with people. And you said like people with air moons like to do like aerobic exercises in specifically, I think you said Aquarians like to do it with people, like in a group setting. And I was like, I don't like exercising by myself.
That's funny. And you know what makes me giggle is Sag, if I think just classically of what Sag rules, it rules all of the cycling muscles. And so we could theoretically make a stretch there too and say, yeah, as a Sag rising person, you not only like to be in a social setting and you like to breathe, you like that air, but you also like to use the Sag muscles in tandem. So that's pretty cute.
That's wild. And I always used to think it was a lot because I used to be a runner, and I always used to think that was my Aries, ruled by Mars. But now when you said that, I was like, oh, actually, it's more about the air moon and how I need to like breathe and be outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so nourishing for air and also for Sagittarius. We like a varied environment. We like to be out and about, and running used to be something I did all the time too. And I attribute that now to my Sag rising nature. Yeah.
Wow, this is so cool. So what about, in Hellenistic astrology, which I mentioned to you I was studying, they see the sixth house as bad luck.
Yeah.
But it's a house that's ruled by health. And, we have our North Node there now. Well, I use the whole house system. What do you think about the sixth house in regards to health?
Yeah. And this is one of those things where I have to do a lot of unlearning and relearning when it comes to really old traditional terms. They're all freaking scary. They sound terrible. And so
what's the point of life?
I know. I might as well just stop now. And so a lot of, work just by myself when I'm studying is like, how can I reframe this for a client? Like, I would never say to a client that this is an unfortunate house and it means all the planets here are bad. I would just, it's not therapeutic. And so you have to think critically about, okay, how can we flip this? How can we honor traditional Hellenistic astrology and also make it usable and not harmful, like do no harm, right? So the way I see the sixth house, we talked about the first is like this thing that carries you through the world, the structure. The sixth house is like day-to-day living and how you do or do not care for your body in a day-to-day way. And so we can see from that, if we decide not to care for our body on the day-to-day, that yes, eventually disease may sprout from that, of course, neglect, not seeing the body, etc. But I like to read the sixth house as how we can support ourselves with routine. Instead of saying, these are the parts of the body that are going to be diseased, because number one, that's incorrect. And number two, it's not helpful. Instead, I look at the sign on the sixth house and the planets on the sixth house, if there are any, and if there aren't, the planetary ruler of the sixth house and where that is, and allow that to inform the client's day-to-day care for themselves. So for example, we're Taurus on the sixth house. And I can't speak for you, but for me, I need things to be pretty regular. I'm a creature of routine. Yeah, I've got a lot of fire in my chart, but when it comes to the nuts and bolts of needing to eat and getting sleep, I really feel nourished in that earthen, fixed, slow and steady Taurus way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the short of it.
I love that. I really love that reframe because with that North Node there, I was like, that looks like doom and gloom, but I like that reframe too with Taurus of like slow and intentional daily habits to support our everyday lives. And then you mentioned the 8th and the 12th, which are like
Yeah.
houses. So how does that deal with medical astrology?
Yeah. So all of these houses, if you look at a chart spatially, they just can't, the first house can't see them. And that's why they got these reputations for being unfortunate, and also why they got their reputations for being health houses. Because if the first is like my body, my health, the parts of the chart that it can't see are parts that we may neglect.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, if we don't give them care and attention, of course, they can get sick and malnourished over time. So just a little backtrack there. But the 8th house, oh, it's so deep. Oh my God, where to begin? Okay, so the way I framed it in my book is I called it chronic body. So this is the area, the sign on this house, the planets in this house might, it's not a guarantee, but might speak to areas of health where there's a longer standing condition, or maybe something that undulates beneath the surface. But the 8th house is also sometimes not very physical. Sometimes it's more mental, emotional health. And so I'll look for planets there that might be a little sad and need some tender, loving care. Because the 8th house is also a house of idleness. So if we have stuff there, sometimes we don't take care of it because it's a little scary. And that's the wonderful thing about medical astrology is we can see the parts of us that we might not attend to because we're afraid. And so if you have a good medical astrologer, they can compassionately point you towards those things so that you can make friends with them. Does that make sense? I kind of went on a tangent.
No, it makes so much sense. And obviously, the sign that the house is in will give you some clues as to how to remedy.
Yeah. And I should have said this like 20 minutes ago, but all the signs rule body areas, right? And that's medical astrology 101. And so knowing the parts of the body that 8th house encompasses is really important because like for us, Cancer, gosh, Cancer rules a lot. I mean, it's anything that holds. So it could range anywhere from the rib cage to the stomach, to the breast, to the womb. But sexual health is a really important part of Cancer and Scorpio, as well as GI stuff. So attending to the Cancer body parts might be uncomfortable because 8th house, we're kind of more comfortable going, I don't see that. It's not really there. Then that's where we kind of run into trouble over time. Yeah. So knowing those body parts are really essential.
Well, I have to pay attention because my North Node is there.
Yeah.
So the universe was like, you're going to look at that stuff.
Yes, you are. You're bringing it in.
Yeah. And then I'm assuming the 12th house is another area where you don't see.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very similar to the 8th, but maybe just a tinge darker, if you will. So how can I describe this? It's classically the house of bad spirits. So let's reframe that. This house, illnesses that arise from this house often have a very spiritual root, or a route where someone has manipulated you. So it can really run the gamut from stories of abuse to this is kind of out there, but like spiritual possession, or feeling like something is an entity has attached to you, really unseen realms of health, which, as we know, can very much affect the physical body. But if we have a 12th house condition, we often really need to go deep down to find the root. It's not easily seen. These are those types of conditions that are often misdiagnosed by physicians, or maybe they go untreated, or maybe they go mistreated. It's really easy. They're slippery and hard to pinpoint. So they're very mysterious.
Mm-hmm. I like mystery. And our 12th is Scorpio, so it's like, yeah, we're gonna get in there.
Yep.
Not that there's like a level of importance or hierarchy, but if we wanted to optimize our health, we can look at the season we're currently in. So right now we're in Aries season, and Aries
Mm-hmm.
is the head, which is,
Mm-hmm.
maybe headaches or some kind of head stuff. And then we can look at our moon and what our moon needs. And then we can
Yeah.
look at, or can you look at your Aries house? Like, how would you like diagnose yourself?
Diagnosing would be super hard, but one way we could do like general astrological self-care, you laid out a pretty great model. So one thing, especially if you're new to astrology, is just paying attention to the sun season. And so like you said, it's Aries season now. And so we would want to know, well, what body parts does Aries rule? It rules the head, brain, and the eyes, which include all of the nerves up here. It's really intense, as well as the ability of the body to fight, flight, freeze. So the adrenal response. So what might we do during Aries season? Sure, we could, get a nice scalp massage and all of that stuff, but we could also really focus on how we respond to stressors and really make that kind of the intention of the month is slowing that urgency down, that fight, freeze response, and bringing more peace and calmness to the nervous system. So nervous system healing is a big one for Aries season, in my opinion, but that's just me. So you could do that. And then you could also use the transiting moon. Like what is the moon in Scorpio today? I think so. I can't remember. And understanding, well, what parts of the body does that rule? Or what does Scorpio like to do? How does it like to move? How does it like to feed itself? And see if that feels good. I find that can sometimes be too much information, especially for someone new to astrology. So less is honestly more. But for the calendar, I would say focus on the sun sign as like a big overarching theme for the month. And then you can fine tune it with where the moon is, or just always keep in touch with your own moon, because that's really personal.
Yeah, that's good to know, actually. And also, I think you started speaking about this. Maybe you didn't, but and I wanted to ask, and I was like, put a mental note in it. My natal Neptune is squaring the Neptune right now, so I'm like, what the
Fun.
heck is happening? Where am I?
What is my name? Yeah.
I'm like, get on track, Laura. Do you also recommend certain types of foods with each moon sign or your medical astrology?
So this is a really juicy question, because I had to wrestle with this for years writing the book and before then. So as I mentioned previously, I'm an anti-diet nutritionist. And so it was such a painful process for me to pay respect to traditional astrology, where foods do belong to planets and therefore to signs, but also not write the book in a way where I was promoting diet culture and saying that this sign needs to eat this food and not that food. So I actually do not focus on that at all. Instead, I focus on how we might want to nourish digestion or a safe eating environment, or I call them therapeutic gestures in the book. So for Aquarius, I think I used autonomy. And so I really focused nutritionally on be your own expert. Do not allow experts and gurus and influencers tell you how you should eat. You innately have this amazing connection to source as an Aquarian person. And I focus on building that up instead of saying Aquarius should eat salt because Saturn rules salt. That can just be a real slippery slope. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anybody going to your book for that is not going to get that. It's mostly about like, your own intuitive coach?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in the very back, I have charts. I did put, these are sun foods, these are Jupiter foods, these are moon foods, but I spend a lot of time saying, do not use that unless you really have to. Like, there's so many other things we can do in nutrition and self-care than what you eat and what you don't eat. Really broadening that definition again of health beyond health behaviors, which would be what I eat. It's more about how I eat, who I eat with, the judgments around what I'm eating, what society tells me I should and should not be eating, and how I respond to that. So yeah, I took more of an intuitive coach stance in the book, just to be safe and to be kind instead of taking a dietary approach.
Yeah. And that must be so like anti what all of these books want you to write, because most people just tell me what to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Mm-hmm.
give me a grocery list so I just figure this out.
Mm-hmm. It's so hard. And the way I reframe that for clients is like, what people want when they come to me is they say, I can't hear my body. How do I listen to my body? And we've been taught through diet culture that, we need this list of foods, we're going to eat this and eat that and don't eat that. And that's how we get connected. Those are actually like lists of foods, and me telling you what to eat is a direct barrier to you hearing yourself. It just lowers the volume more, until we can't hear anything at all. It totally disconnects us. But we're not taught that. We're taught that we're supposed to follow these rules, et cetera, and that they're safe and that they're for our benefit. And so I spend a lot of time undoing that.
Mhm. People ask me all the time, what do you eat? And I think and I think also I listen to, or I pay attention to how I feel when I eat the food. Like, does
Yeah.
it bother my stomach? Can I poop it out in 24 hours? Is
Yeah.
like, do I get cramps? And I really pay attention to that versus like, I'm not going to eat an entire food group, or I'm a gluten-free vegan, blah blah blah. I really do pay
Mm-hmm.
attention to how it makes me feel and if it can go through my body easily.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's connection, right? That's intuitive connection to your body. And I just ethically really had a hard time with the idea of telling certain signs to eat certain ways, because I would be distancing them from that innate knowing. And so it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, to be completely honest.
Hmm. But you do give certain advice on how to move the body. Um,
Yeah, I do, but I also still take that gesture approach where I say, gosh, let me pick out an example because I have a bad memory. Like for Sagittarius, the movement gesture I gave Sagittarius was locomotion. So I didn't say go running,
mhm.
go cycling. I said locomotion, which means exploring, getting out, meeting people, seeing different things, variety. All of those things are nourishing to Sagittarius, but there's so many ways to do that in movement. You can do that through yoga. You can do that through sport. You can do that at CrossFit if you want to. There's so many ways to do locomotion. And so again, I took that same approach. I don't want to call it vague, but it's just like, here's a theme, fill it however you want, do it in any way you want, but the theme is locomotion. Does that make sense?
Yes, it
Yeah.
totally makes sense. It kind of goes with the theme of Sagittarius, which is like adventure and like
Yeah.
exploration and traveling. Yeah.
Yeah. But I couldn't say, like, to me, go hiking. I don't really like going hiking, to be completely frank. So, like, I knew that if I wrote a book that was like, Aquarius should play basketball, well, it's not going to resonate with most of the readers because most of them probably don't play basketball. So it just, it's where astrology gets dangerous, you know, when you say you should not, blah, blah, blah.
Right. That's also how I feel about astrology in general. We spoke a little bit before we press record on my personal feeling about astrology and how it's used. I believe that it's an energetic signature and the person has the free will to use it how they want to. And of course there's a destiny part of it, and there's like things that you bring in from your past and your family, but I don't think we came here just to be victims of our past. I believe we came here with agency to like change our future.
Mm-hmm.
Personally.
Yeah. No, we're like high five, samesies. That's the Aquarius Moon in us. It's like, don't tell me what to do.
Don't tell me what to believe.
Don't tell me what my fate is. I will decide. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's why I was so scared of astrology for so long growing up too, because my stereotype, I guess, or my misinformation around astrology was that you meet with someone and they tell you what's happening, what's going to happen, and it felt too scary for I couldn't. It just made me shut down. And so I'm very careful in practice to always put power back in the client's hands. And it really frustrates people sometimes. Not a lot. I have a great group of clients, but once in a while, someone's like, just tell me. And I'm like, I can't. I can give you a realm of possibility, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. No. Yeah.
What do you say to those people who, and I don't know who I'm directing this to. I've heard a lot of astrologers and even like wellness and spiritual practitioners say like you manifested that.
Mm.
You chose to be sick. And so
Oh.
do you believe like when you have a chart, someone's natal chart, and and I'm sure you have other like aspects and configurations that show that, do you believe that we choose these things and that we like manifest them?
Whew, what a question. Okay.
Just your belief. Like you just your belief. It doesn't have to be rooted in any kind of research or anything.
Yeah, my personal belief, I personally distance myself from the manifestation community intentionally. I'll just speak for myself. I won't speak for clients, but I have felt harmed by that line of thinking, especially as someone who has dealt with chronic illness and mental illness, which is so stigmatized, et cetera, for so long. When someone, and I've had many a person tell this to me, you chose to make yourself sick, you're making yourself sick, you're doing this to yourself. Whether, like, I recognize now that there are things that I've done to contribute to discomfort. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, that did not help me at all. It was not therapeutic. It was not kind. It was not compassionate. And so it's really important for me as a practitioner to make sure that I am doing my best not to operate in that realm at all. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry that happened to you.
Oh, thanks. I mean,
I would have been like, fuck you.
I wasn't quite there yet. I was still like, oh, but now.
Because how is that helping me?
Right. It's just not helpful. It's not helpful at all. And I think it's just a real slippery slope to say that you create your illness or you create your good fortune even. Like, yes, I think we participate. Yes, I think we have agency and we make choices and we put energy in different directions. But sometimes the body, it breaks down, it dies, and so in a way, like, I want to work with the natural order of things instead of continuously fighting against it and saying I'm not manifesting good health, etc.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, I'm so sorry. Like I've heard this rhetoric a lot, especially during the panorama with um, COVID, when
Hmm.
um, certain certain like influencers would say like you manifested COVID or like you
No,
manifested getting sick, and I was like, oh, but oh.
no. Yeah, I definitely no. Yeah, and
Your
honestly,
vibration is so low. What do you think
I
about that
can't.
too?
No, and there's so much wrong with that because there's so much privilege in that statement. And there's roots in racism in that statement and healthism in that statement. There's just so much wrong with saying that because there's, unequal access to healthcare and to resources and all of that stuff. And so to me, that realm of thought is just really dangerous
Mhm.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you believe that we we have like a I think you did mention that we have like a vibration, obviously, like what am I trying to say? Like we have different bodies, energy bodies versus just physical. And so do those other bodies also attribute to our moon and our first house and our ascendant?
Oh, um, yeah, I mean, it's not really my realm of expertise, but if you want to think about energy bodies, that would be an interesting astrological exploration. So here's a hypothesis, and everyone can go do an experiment. I would say the moon definitely has a lot to do with that. But also maybe the signs in your eighth and 12th house, those very spiritual signs and the vibrations and the signs there, the planets there too, what elements they are, all of that, and just sit with that and see how that resonates with you. But yeah, as far as vibration and subtle bodies, definitely not something I work with on a day-to-day basis, but I think those are places you can start looking for it in the chart. Does that answer your question well enough?
Yes. Yes. Well, just because like planets to me emit a specific energy.
Oh yeah.
And that, especially like if you look at the ruler of your ascendant, because it's so
Mm-hmm.
important in your natal chart and like what that planet is specifically doing right now, which is probably why I'm so tongue tied.
I know.
Next to Neptune, which is why I also believe that it's so much more than just the physical body and like how we can remedy our physical body, but also our emotional, mental, spiritual, and energetic bodies.
Absolutely. And us knowing that our planetary ruler is conjunct Neptune right now, it creates a lot of compassion for the fact that we might have a little brain fog and maybe we were late to our appointment and maybe, like all of that stuff. And so knowing that, I think is so powerful because it just, I don't know, it kind of relieves the pressure, if you
Yeah.
will.
Just a
Yeah.
personal anecdote. So I went, I went to Manhattan yesterday because I wanted to really do all of the things that I wanted to do with this Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces conjunction. So, like, I went to an art museum, I walked around
Oh,
with my sister. Like, I wanted to embody this, like, generosity and this, like, Neptunian force of, like, art. But what ended up happening was I was super hungry. So, I went to this, like, food court with my sister and I ordered tacos, pizza, and noodles all to myself. And I was like, wow,
yes.
Jupiter, like
Yes.
everything.
That's so funny. Oh, I love it.
Have you eaten breakfast? And I was like, I don't know. I just feel really hungry and I just want to eat a lot.
Yeah, Jupe made me do it. I love that you just leaned right into that. That's perfect.
But I was like, wow, that really was like very Jupiterian. I was just like, I'm just going to feed myself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love it.
How have you been feeling this energy within yourself?
Oh my goodness. It's been a little bit of a struggle for me, to be completely honest. I don't feel well. I'm nauseous and really tired. And, those are all watery symptoms as well. If we want to think about the body and elements from a physical standpoint. And I have felt like I'm just kind of out of touch with time and space, which is really uncomfortable for me as a Virgo. I like my bulleted list. I like to know where I am. And I feel a little out to sea, to be completely honest.
Wow, because your sun is opposing that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Luckily it's pretty far away from my sun. They're on opposite ends of the signs, but it's enough, it's enough.
Yeah. My sister's a Virgo, so I
Oh yeah.
understand Virgo suns very well.
Oh, we're interesting.
But she reigns in a lot of my Sagittarian like chaos.
Uh-huh. I love that.
So, is there anything else you wanted to share about your book or about your practice that I didn't ask you?
I don't think so. I think we had just a delightful conversation. This was really fun. No, I think, for those of you listening, that not to be afraid to lean into the autonomy of your own health and your own body, and to really rely on your expertise being the one that's in that body. And even looking at astrology, knowing that you still have choice, you still have options, and that nothing is going to tell you what to do, how to be, how to eat, how to move. And if something is, to question that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And as I like to say, if you don't have your health, you have nothing. Health is wealth. It has the same etymological root. And so I think like your book, I definitely want to get your book, obviously, is like a perfect gateway to explore more about yourself and how you feel. I really think that one of the things that I really like about you, no, I don't think, I believe, is that you offer up the wisdom, but then it's ultimately up to us how we choose to like take ownership of our health.
Mm. Oh, thank you. That's a really lovely reflection. I hope that's what I do. That's what I hope to do. Yeah.
You do. And
Well,
before I jumble up all my words, I just want to say thank you so much.
you're
I
welcome.
will link everything down in the show notes. Thank you so much, Claire. This was a beautiful conversation. And good luck with your book. Oh my gosh.
Thank you. And yeah, it's out. Here she is, wherever books are sold. Yeah.
Cool.
It's a pretty hardcover, beautifully illustrated little nugget. So yeah, thanks for having me. This was so fun.